I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. Before we get started, I just wanted to let y'all know that we had a live ghost hunt this past weekend on Facebook. We managed to get some pretty good EVPs, and we are planning some more live events in the future, so you might want to like our Facebook page in order to have access to those. We also have a TikTok, and a YouTube and an Instagram, but I can't keep up with all of them. Mainly I'm on Facebook, and I have hired a new TikTok manager, which is my sister, and she doesn't get paid. So there's that. Just so you know, prior to coming home and recording, I went to dinner and had some Guinness. So we'll see how this goes. Let's get to this week's episode, which is the conclusion of the Heol Fanog story. When we left off last week, Bill and Liz Rich were being tormented by a tall, beaked figure. They felt that David Holcomb, who had come to exorcise the house, wasn't able to completely help them. So Liz reached out to a Dr. John Ashton from the Christian World Revival. After 3 months of prayer and planning, John Ashton arranged to visit Heol Fanog. The Watcher, as they called it, continued to watch, sometimes from a distance, sometimes close, but either way the Riches felt the hatred pouring out of it. Around this time, Bill and Liz decide to get another dog. They settle on a Doberman, and they name him Bo. At first, Bo was unfazed by the house, but eventually he started growling at things in the kitchen hallway. Things that nobody else saw. The condition worsened as Bo howled and paced in circles. On July 29, 1993, John Ashton arrives at the house. He's in his 70s and is tall, slender, and very distinguished looking. He came with 3 assistants, his wife, along with a younger man, and his wife. Liz took the children out of the house on a picnic with her mother. She and Bill worked very hard to keep the negative things away from the younger children. John Ashton walked the house, and when he got to the playroom, which was the former nursery where the old woman was seen, he said he felt someone had died in the room. When he got to Bill's studio, he felt tension and said there was a strong evil presence in the room. Ashton suggested singing an old hymn, and the mood shifted slightly. They ventured outside and approached the ruins of the old manor house. They said there was a presence there, and it wasn't a good one. Liz arrived back at the house after sending the kids with her mother. Bill and Liz were separated into different rooms. It seemed that John Ashton had some suspicion that Liz had something to do with what was going on at Heol Fanog, which is a switch from the others thinking it was Bill. They asked Liz if she believed that Jesus Christ was her Lord and Savior. The voice that responded was not Liz's, but something more masculine that said, "No, nothing to do with me," followed by inhuman laughter. Liz's face contorted. After it was all done, Liz was crying, and everyone took communion. And the house seemed lighter. The next day, Bill and Liz called the local dog warden to see if she could check for any cause for Bo's behavior. And before you say anything, yes, we all know the house is nuts, and most likely the cause but the number one rule of any paranormal investigation is to rule out every possible explanation. The dog warden arrived and chatted with Liz, who mentioned the exorcism. I wonder how that goes in conversation. You just nonchalantly say, "Oh yes, nice weather we're having," and "Oh yes, we had an exorcism the other day. I spoke in tongues, barfed up pea green soup, and had my head spin around." Anyway, so Liz mentioned the exorcism to the dog warden. The dog warden was not surprised and said she was familiar with Heol Fanog. The dog warden's statement read, "Bridget Buscombe, who used to live in Heol Fanog, was a very good friend of mine. In the summer of 1986, Bridget went away to work in Oxford for a while, and I would go up to the house every day to feed and water her animals. There were some sheep and a Shetland pony, so I had to keep going back and forth into the house to fetch buckets of water. I never used to like crossing the hallway, and I never liked going upstairs at all, but I always used to put it down to the normal feelings you would get in an empty house a long way from anywhere. The first time I was there on my own, I was in the kitchen, and I heard what sounded like footsteps running along the landing upstairs. I just freaked out. I made myself go upstairs, but there was nothing there. Nothing was amiss. But when I was on the landing, I always had this feeling that somebody was going past the foot of the stairs. The sound upstairs carried on whenever I went back. In the end, I was dreading going up there. I'd start to park the car at the end of the drive and walk up to the house, because I thought I could get away quicker if I left it outside the gate. My stepson spent a lot of time at Heol Fanog as a child, and he always described it as an island of silence. There were times when the birds never sang. In the end, the dog warden found no cause for Beau's behavior, but he continued barking and whimpering. Bill placed another story in the newspaper in November of 1993. Bill and Liz were contacted by a man whose wife owned a TV production company. They wanted to film an exorcism with Eddie Burks, who was successful in exorcising a ghost at Coots & Company, the Queen's Bank. After some thought and discussion, the Riches agree. Their third child is then born January 1994. Eddie Burks is set to arrive March 13th of 1994. In February, the presence was foreboding, and Bill was not working and was not sleeping. Sitting in the kitchen, he noticed a meat cleaver on the table. He became angry because he was always insisting that it needed to be put away and out of the reach of the children. He picked it up to put away. The moment his fingers touched it, he thought about how it would feel slicing through his skin. Bill shook his head and put the knife in the drawer. He kept having thoughts of slicing his wrist and thinking of the blood. He tried to make the thoughts go away, but they persisted. Then the knife was back on the table. Bill yelled at the presence, saying that it would not do that to him, and knocked the knife to the floor. Liz came running in to see what all the yelling was about. Bill told her what happened, that the house wanted him to kill himself. The day that Eddie Banks arrived, there was a full house. Liz, the kids, both Bill's and Liz's mothers, the McDonalds, who contacted Bill originally, and the cameraman. Liz and the mothers took the kids away after detailing what had been going on at the house. Burks put a barrier of light around the house. Afterwards, the feeling of oppression was gone, and the house seemed larger. The electricity usage dipped for the first time. There were no footsteps or apparitions, but something still lingered. They called Burks, who was surprised the exorcism had not worked. Liz then sees another apparition. It's a ghost that looks like he was in a car crash, with half his face missing and blood all over him. He wasn't threatening at all, and just wandered in the garden. Burks told them that an area in the garden would draw earthbound spirits so that they could cross over. Into the spring of 1995, They were haunted by apparitions constantly passing through. An old lady, an old man, a child, and several middle-aged men and women passed through, though they weren't threatening. Lawrence began to visit the house. On his visits, he was calm, lively, and reassured. He would take Beau on long walks and play with his siblings. But they were growing tired of the parade of ghosts. They just wanted a normal life. Then the electricity creeped up again. Bill's business took another mysterious turn for the worse, and the house's mood changed. Eddie Burks arrived back at the house on June 8, 1995, with 3 members of the esteemed London-based organization, the Society for Psychical Research. Liz took the kids away per usual. This felt like their last chance. The house tension was overwhelming. Burks walked slowly around the room while a tape recorder recorded everything. Nothing happened for a while, then Bill noticed a change sweep over him like a dark cloud. Burks sat down, then got up again, then sat down, and said he was unable to get any personality. Then Burks said, "At the moment I'm tending to confirm Liz's impression that this is something shadowy. There is no impression of personality at all so far. Normally at this stage I would be aware of personality. It's not that it's just elusive, it's that there is nothing to be elusive. I have got to somehow identify this." Burks continued after some time. "I think this thing, this creature, elemental, or whatever, I shall get a clearer idea later, it's got to be rendered inoperative, dissolved, dispersed." Then Burke was able to sense something. He said, "It's very ancient. It preceded events about which we know. It even preceded the black magic rituals which took place prior to the murder in the middle of the last century." You'll hear about the murder in a minute. "There's a quality here which is very primitive, sacrificial. It's been aroused or resuscitated by events. It needs to be resuscitated because it needs to be dispersed. It's been lying dormant for several thousand years. I suspect, but I don't know for sure, that it's Celtic ritualistic sacrificial." Burke sensed that it was related to the misuse of natural forces. He said it arose originally through Celtic nature worship of a corrupt sort and was invoked by a Celtic priesthood in a bad phase. It has got an animalistic aspect to it. He felt it had been invoked to create mischief against other tribes or other people. It was something that would have struck terror in those people. Burke said it was pre-Christian and did not respond to Christian methods. While Burks worked to rid the house of the entity, he muttered to himself. The tension in the house was palpable, and eventually the room grew noticeably brighter. Burke said he had done what needed to be done, but the real question was, had it worked? As of March 1996, there was no resurgence of activity. The electric bill was less than the average home. Bill's work picked up instantly, and Lawrence visited regularly. Though it seemed the thing was gone, they still felt they needed to leave Heol Fanog. So what was the cause of what went on at Heol Fanog? What is the history there? There was mention of a murder, and there was a grisly one on a neighboring farm. On November 17, 1848, a farm servant was murdered by having his brain beaten out by an axe at Cumgoody, though some believed there was some kind of connection to Heol Fanog. Thomas Edwards was murdered by his friends James Griffiths. In case you're interested, James Griffiths was also known as Thomas Williams. We're just going to call him James. After Thomas was killed, his killer took his clothes, money, and a watch and stashed his body in a manure pile. James Griffiths said, "I first thought of killing Thomas Edwards a week before I did it. I never had a quarrel of any account with him. He was always a quiet lad, but passionate. Thomas was struck with repeated blows until he was dead. James's intention was to bury Thomas in the dung pile, but a girl came out of the house. James accompanied the girl to get water, and she saw something, and that's when James discovered the body. There was speculation at the time that Thomas had stumbled across something he shouldn't have seen. Most notably, a black magic or satanic ritual of some kind, and those people had James carry out the deed with a promise they would help him. But help didn't arrive and James was executed. Murder is certainly a possible reason why a place would be haunted, but the murder took place elsewhere, not at Heol Fanog. Another possible contribution to what was going on goes back to the time right before the Riches moved to Heol Fanog. The new blended family of Bill, Liz, and Lawrence took a trip to Egypt in the hopes it would help bring them together as a family. There, they toured the Great Pyramid built for Khufu. While in the burial chamber, Liz saw strange lights and called out to Bill and Lawrence. They didn't see the lights, but they all felt like something was in there with them, and it felt evil. Many others have felt power while visiting the burial chamber. It's an interesting fact that Bill's grandmother was an Egyptologist and was present for the opening of Tut's tomb. Perhaps something came back with them. It could explain the beaked figure similar to the god Horus and the strange ancient pendant found at Liz's mother's house. But there's another possible explanation. You'll remember that some were certain that Bill was the reason all this was happening to them. Back when he was young, Bill was living in a basement apartment, and one of his housemates was Alex Sanders. Alex Sanders was known as the King of the Witches in the 1960s, and actors, pop stars, etc. all participated in his rituals. Alex offered to make Bill a witch, telling him it would make him a famous artist. At the time of the ritual, Bill was stripped and blindfolded. Alex and his wife recited incantations, welcoming him in as a witch. They held a sword to his heart, and at the time, Bill told them to stop. Maxine Sanders, Alex's former wife, confirmed this story. She remembered Bill because it was the only time someone had changed their mind and backed out in the middle of the ritual. She said he was blindfolded, bound, and naked, and said, "I want to stop." She said Bill was straightforward and well-balanced, and there was an innocence about him. She also said it was dangerous to back them out. She said he was in a gateway, and believed it could have caused consequences down the road. In addition to these explanations, the land there where Heol Fanog sits is full of spiritual history. The area is known for its deep history with witches, and the Celts, who had warriors who wore bird helmets, were all over the area. Some believe that the thing at Heol Fanog was a tulpa, something created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. It's thought to be brought about through prayer or ritual to bring harm and cause hate and fear, and was rooted in the native landscape. Which, interestingly, goes along with Eddie Burke's thoughts at the final exorcism. So what went on there? Was it something that followed them from Egypt? Was it brought about by Bill's near entry into the world of witchcraft? Was it the murder or the history of witchcraft? I don't think we'll ever really know for sure. Heol Fanog is occupied, and the family that lives there sent a letter into a podcast that was featuring the story and said, nothing happening in the 25 years they've been there, and the electric meter is fine. But then again, it seemed like Eddie Burks managed to finally rid the house of the problem. In 1996, Liz received an inheritance from her grandfather that allowed them to move from Heol Fanog. Liz and Bill eventually divorced, and Bill, who was drinking heavily throughout their time at Heol Fanog, passed away. And on that happy note, that's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can find episodes on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. You can also find us on the website at lurkpodcast.com, and on the website you can also find links to the social media accounts. Remember to keep your eyes out for another Facebook Live, and until next time, keep lurking.